The millionaire came home early and discovered what his wife was doing to his mother. He entered through the back door and heard a distorted voice he had never heard like that before. Unseen, he witnessed a scene that would freeze any son, his mother, silent, being treated like a burden by the one who should have cared for her. In the following days, hidden cameras revealed something even darker, and every new image pushed him further away from the woman he thought he knew. The taxi cut through the illuminated streets of New York City on that rainy October night. Robert Miller watched through the window as the lights of the city that never sleeps blurred past, feeling the exhaustion of 3 intense weeks of negotiations in Dubai and London. At 42, he had built a real estate empire that had started with a small office in Queens and now spanned 5 countries. His company, Miller Construction, had just closed the biggest deal in its history, a luxury residential complex that would change the skyline of an entire neighborhood in Manhattan. But none of that mattered as much as the certainty of returning home, to the mansion on the Upper East Side, where 6 months ago he had finally managed to bring his mother to live. Helena was 73 years old and had a story that Robert carried in his heart like a precious jewel. She had come from South Korea in the 70s, alone, pregnant, fleeing an arranged marriage that suffocated her. She had landed in the United States with a literature degree that no one recognized and the determination of someone with nowhere to return to. Throughout Robert's childhood, Helena had worked 3 jobs. By day, she sewed in a garment factory in the garment district. In the afternoon, she cleaned offices in Midtown. At night, she studied English in a worn-out notebook, sitting at the kitchen table of a tiny apartment in Astoria. Robert remembered her hands, always rough, always moving. He remembered the smell of fabric and laundry detergent that clung to her clothes. He remembered how she would cry softly in the shower, thinking he couldn't hear. It was for her that Robert studied. It was for her that he worked from the age of 14, delivering newspapers at dawn before going to school. It was for her that he graduated in civil engineering from Columbia University on a full scholarship, that he founded his company, that he grew. Every brick he laid in his construction projects was, in some way, a silent tribute to the woman who had sacrificed everything so he could have a chance. When he finally convinced her to leave the modest apartment where she had always lived and move into the mansion, Robert felt he was, at last, honoring a debt that could never be repaid. Patricia, his wife, had seemed receptive to the idea, or at least that's what he believed. The taxi stopped in front of the wrought iron gate. Robert paid the fare, grabbed his suitcase, and typed in the entry code. It was almost 11 on a Thursday night. Normally, he would have called to let them know when he'd arrive, but this time he wanted it to be a surprise. He wanted to see his mother's face light up when she saw him, to hug her without warning, like in the old days. The house was lit up. Robert went around the main entrance and decided to enter through the kitchen, through the side door that led to the service area. It was an old habit from the time he still lived with his mother and came home late from work, entering silently so as not to wake her. He turned the key in the lock and pushed the door open. What he saw paralyzed him. Helena was standing by the stove, holding a pot of rice. She was wearing an apron Robert recognized from his childhood, mended so many times that the seams formed a map of memories. Her face, usually serene, was tense. Her eyes, those dark eyes, that had soothed him in his childhood, were moist. Patricia was facing away from the door, but her voice echoed through the kitchen with a coldness Robert had never heard. "Do you think you can use my kitchen like it's some roadside diner? Do you think I'm going to let this house smell like your strange foods every time I have important guests?" Helena tried to answer in English, her heavy accent making each word a visible effort. "I only make Korean food for Robert when he get home. He like very much. I think that—" Patricia cut her off with a dry laugh. "You think? You who can barely speak properly, who dresses like you're still in that horrible little apartment in Astoria, you think? Let me explain something to you, Helena. This house has a standard you clearly don't understand. When my friends come over, when we have dinner parties, I need everything to be perfect. And you, with your old clothes, with this food of yours that stinks of I don't know what, you ruin everything." Robert felt the blood run cold in his veins. He stood motionless, suitcase still in hand, unable to— process what he was hearing. This was not the woman he had married 5 years ago. This was not the Patricia he had met at a business event, the elegant and sophisticated lawyer who seemed to understand his values, his history, his origins. Patricia continued, and every word was a blade. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to eat your weird little food right here, in the service area, away from the dining room, away from the guests. And if I catch you using the house china again, the good silverware, I'll throw it all out. Understand? Or do I need to draw you a picture? Helena lowered her head, clutching the pot to her chest as if protecting a child. Her voice came out so low that Robert had to strain to hear. I understand. Sorry, I no want trouble. It was then that Robert heard the sound of a car pulling into the garage. His own car, which the company driver had picked up from the airport earlier and left there. The headlights swept across the kitchen wall for a second. Patricia froze. In a movement so swift it seemed rehearsed, her expression transformed completely. The hard, cruel face gave way to a warm smile. She turned to Helena, her voice now melodious and gentle. Oh, Helena, let me help you with that. You didn't have to go to the trouble of making dinner so late. Come, let's set the table. Robert will love it. Helena raised her face, confused. Her eyes met Patricia's, trying to understand the sudden change. But then she saw Robert, standing in the doorway, and her whole body trembled. The pot nearly slipped from her hands. Robert told himself to go in, to confront, to explode, but something kept him there, paralyzed, watching. Patricia hadn't seen him yet. She took the pot from Helena's trembling hands and began to serve the rice onto a plate, all false solicitude, all manufactured kindness. Robert backed away silently, closed the door carefully, and went around the house to the main entrance. His mind was spinning, trying to process what he had just witnessed. He needed to think. He needed to understand the extent of it before he acted. He opened the front door, making a deliberate noise, dropped his suitcase on the hall floor and called out, I'm home, anyone awake? Patricia appeared from the kitchen seconds later, a perfect smile on her face, her arms open. Robert, what a wonderful surprise. Why didn't you tell us you were coming home today? She hugged him, and Robert felt nauseous. The French perfume that had always attracted him now seemed cloying. The arms that had always welcomed him now felt like a trap. I wanted to surprise you, he replied, forcing a smile. Where's Mom? Oh, she's in the kitchen. She prepared a delicious dinner for you. That Korean food you love. She was so excited for you to get here. Robert walked to the kitchen. Helena was sitting at the table, the plate of rice before her untouched. When she saw him, she stood up with difficulty, her eyes lighting up for a brief second before filling with something Robert recognized as fear. Robert, you come back. She went to him and hugged him, but the hug was weak, hesitant. He could feel her trembling. Hi, Mom. Did you miss me? Always miss you, son. She forced a smile, but Robert saw the pain behind it. Come, sit. Food still warm. They sat at the table, and Patricia served wine, talking about renovations to the house, about the weather, about trivialities. Robert ate mechanically, watching how his mother barely touched her food, watching how Patricia controlled every movement, every word, watching how Helena seemed smaller, more fragile, as if she were trying to take up as little space as possible. After dinner, when Patricia went up to the bedroom claiming she was tired, Robert was left alone with his mother. He wanted to ask, to confront, but something in her expression stopped him. There was a silent shame there, a mute plea for him not to make it bigger than it already was. Mom, how are you, really? Are you happy here? Helena looked away, her hands busy folding and unfolding a cloth napkin. I good, Robert. You give nice house, good food. I have everything I need. But are you happy? She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was a whisper. Happiness not important, son. Important you have good life. Life I never have. You have big house, beautiful wife, respect. That what I always want for you. Robert felt a tightness in his chest. But what about you, Mom? What do you want for yourself? She raised her face. Then, and Robert saw silent tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. I old Robert, I already live my life. Now just want to see you well. Only that." He wanted to insist, but she stood up, collected the plates hastily, and muttered something about being tired. Robert watched her climb the stairs towards the room she occupied on the second floor, small and discreet, far from the master bedroom he shared with Patricia. Alone in the kitchen, Robert looked around. The house he had built to be a refuge suddenly felt like a prison. He went up to his office, locked the door and turned on his computer. The mansion had a complete security system, with cameras in all the main rooms. It was a system Patricia had insisted on installing, citing security. Robert had never paid much attention, trusting that everything was fine. Now for the first time he accessed the recordings. He started with that same night, going back a few hours. He saw his mother in the kitchen, carefully preparing dinner, each movement a silent prayer. He saw Patricia enter, and the scene he had witnessed replayed on the screen, even more cruel when seen from another angle. He went back further. A week, 2, a month. What he saw destroyed him. Patricia throwing away the food his mother prepared, saying it smelled bad. Patricia preventing Helena from sitting at the table when guests were over, sending her to eat in the service area. Patricia mocking her accent in front of her friends. Patricia locking the library, the living room, saying those spaces were not for her. In one of the recordings, Robert saw his mother trying to enter the living room to water the plants, one of the few activities she said she enjoyed. Patricia had stopped her, saying she didn't know how to take care of anything, that she would ruin everything with her coarse seamstress hands. Helena had retreated, apologizing, always apologizing. Robert watched until the first light of morning began to filter through the office windows. He watched until his vision blurred with tears he refused to shed. He watched until he understood that his mother, the woman who had given up everything for him, was being systematically humiliated and destroyed in the house he had built to honor her. At 7 in the morning, exhausted and shattered, Robert went down to the kitchen. Maria, the maid who had worked with the family for 3 years, was already there making coffee. She saw him, and her expression changed. There was something there that Robert recognized, painful complicity. "Maria," he said, his voice hoarse with fatigue and emotion, "I need to talk to you." She dried her hands on her apron and looked around nervously. "Not here, Mr. Miller. She could come down any minute." "Then let's go to the garden." They went out the back door and walked to the pergola covered in wisteria. The sun was still low and the air had that New York autumn chill that would soon be consumed by the city's hustle. Maria took a deep breath before speaking. "I wanted to tell you sooner, Mr. Miller. I swear I did. But Mrs. Patricia, she threatened me. She said if I said anything about how she treated Mrs. Helena, she'd fire me without references. And I have 3 kids, you know. I can't lose this job." Robert placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not going to lose anything, Maria. I promise. But I need you to tell me everything, everything." And she told him. She told him about the yelling when Robert wasn't home, about how Patricia called Helena names that Maria was ashamed to repeat, about how she would hide his mother's things, her belongings, her old photos, about how she had forbidden Helena from answering the phone or receiving mail, about how she controlled her every move, her every breath. "There's one more thing, Mr. Miller." Maria hesitated, biting her lip. "She's been looking for lawyers. I heard her on the phone. Something about having Mrs. Helena committed, about saying she's not right in the head." Robert felt the ground disappear from under his feet. "What?" "She wants to have her committed. She says she's going to get medical documents, reports, things like that. That she's going to say Mrs. Helena is getting senile, that she can't take care of herself anymore. I heard her telling a friend that she was going to make your mother disappear, but in a way that looked good for her own good." Robert closed his eyes, trying to control the fury that rose like lava in his veins. How had he not seen it? How had he let it get to this point? "Maria, listen. From now. From on, you write everything down. Everything she does, everything she says. Send me texts. Can you do that?" The maid nodded, her eyes welling up. "I'll do it, Mr. Miller. Mrs. Helena doesn't deserve any of this. She's too good, you know. Always kind to me, Always asks about my children. She even taught me how to make those pretty paper rolls, origami. I think that's what it's called. She's special." Robert hugged Maria, thanked her, and went back inside. Patricia was in the kitchen, impeccable in her navy blue tailored suit, sipping an espresso while checking her phone. "Good. Morning, darling." She smiled at him, that smile that no longer fooled him. "Sleep well?" "I did," he lied. "And you?" "Perfectly. Oh, I forgot to tell you. Tonight I have that charity dinner at the club. Remember? I sent you the schedule last week." "I remember. Your mother will be fine here with Maria. Besides, I've been thinking that maybe it's better for her to have her own routine, you know? She doesn't need to accompany us to every social engagement. It can be tiring for her at her age." Robert gripped his coffee cup so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I see." "Great." Patricia gave him a quick kiss on the forehead and grabbed her purse. "I have an early meeting. I'll see you tonight. And don't forget, dark suit." She left, and Robert heard the roar of her car disappearing through the gates. He went up to his mother's room and knocked gently on the door. "Come in," her soft voice came from the other side. Helena was sitting by the window, folding small squares of colored paper. Robert recognized the origami. She always did that when she was anxious or sad. In his childhood, whenever money was tight or a problem arose, he would wake up to find little paper birds, flowers, and butterflies scattered around the house, as if her sadness needed to take shape to be endured. "Mom," he began, but she raised a hand, asking for silence. "I know what you come to say, Robert." She didn't look at him, keeping her eyes on the delicate figures she was creating. "But I ask one thing. Do nothing. Please." "What do you mean, do nothing? She's treating you like—" "Like what, son?" she interrupted, and there was a hardness in her voice Robert had never heard. "Like foreigner, like someone who not belong. This not new for me. All my life this. I know how to live." "But this isn't right." Helena finally faced him, and Robert saw that she was different. Older, yes, but also more resigned, as if a part of her had given up on something fundamental. "You know what you have, Robert. You have respect. You have position. You have life I always dream for you. If you fight with her, if you make scandal, all this can be lost. And then everything I suffer, everything I do will be for nothing." "It's not for nothing, it's for you, for us." She shook her head slowly, returning to folding the paper. I already live my life. Let me be quiet. Let me not be problem." "You're not a problem, Mum. You never were. But now I am. She live in this house when you meet her. She have her way, have her taste. I come later, I intruder. Normal she not want me here." "No, it's not normal." Robert sat beside her, taking her hands. "Mum, I brought you here because I wanted to take care of you. Because you deserve it. I'm not going to let anyone treat you this way." Helena squeezed his hands, and tears began to roll silently down her face. "Son, you not understand. I foreigner. I always be foreigner. Even after 50 years here, my accent always show I not born here. My face always show. When I speak, people look strange. When I try to explain, people lose patience. I get used to it. But you not. You born here. You American. You not need to carry this thing I carry." Robert felt the tears burning his own eyes. "I carry you, Mum. And it's not a burden, it's an honor." She smiled sadly, releasing his hands and returning to the origami. "Then honor me by being quiet. Honor me by not making her more angry. Honor me by being invisible. I know how to do that. I do my whole life." Robert wanted to argue, to scream, to make his mother understand that this was not acceptable. But there was such a deep plea in her eyes, such an ancient weariness, that he found himself paralyzed. How many times had she been invisible so he could be seen? How many times had she been silent so he could have a voice? He left the room with a broken heart, knowing that the battle he needed to fight was not just against Patricia. It was against decades of silencing, against a pain so ingrained that his mother could no longer imagine she deserved anything else. Robert spent the day at his company's office, but his mind was far from spreadsheets and contracts. In the afternoon, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Maria, with an audio file attached. She explained that she had recorded a conversation between Patricia and a friend when they came to pick up some documents from the living room. Robert locked his office door and put on his headphones. Patricia's voice echoed, clear and venomous. "You have no idea what a nightmare it is to have that old woman in the house, Brenda. She walks the halls like a ghost speaking that strange language, and the worst part is Robert gets all emotional, thinking he's doing the right thing, as if it's an obligation to take in your parents when they get old and useless." The other voice, which Robert assumed was Brenda's, replied, "But can't you just ask her to leave? It's not that simple. Robert has this thing with her, you know, like a son complex. But I'm working on it. I've already spoken with a lawyer specializing in conservatorship. The idea is to get a report proving she no longer has the capacity to care for herself. Then we'll put her in an institution. A first-class one, of course, nothing bad. But she needs to get out of here." "And Robert will go along with that?" Patricia laughed, a chilling sound. "He'll have to. I'll make it seem like it's for her. Own good. That she needs specialized care, and honestly, after she's gone, I'm sure he'll even be grateful. Life will be so much easier without that embarrassing presence." Robert turned off the audio, his stomach churning. It wasn't just cruelty. It was a calculated, meticulous plan to erase his mother from his life, to remove what Patricia saw as a flaw in her perfect construction of success and status. He spent the rest of the day gathering information. He spoke with a trusted lawyer, explained the situation in detail, showed him the security footage, the audio Maria had sent. The lawyer, a 60-year-old man who had known Robert since college, listened to everything in silence. "Robert, this is serious, very serious, but you need to be prepared. If you decide to act, your life is going to be turned upside down. Patricia won't take this quietly. She'll fight back, and she'll fight back hard." "I know, but I can't let this continue. Then we'll need everything. All the recordings, all the audio, all the testimonies, and even then it's going to be a battle. A public, ugly battle that will tarnish your reputation." Robert took a deep breath. "I don't care. My reputation without my mother is worthless." The lawyer nodded. "Then let's prepare everything, but Robert, talk to her first. To your mother. She needs to be on board, because once this starts, there's no going back." That night, Robert didn't go to the charity dinner. He feigned illness and stayed home. He waited for Patricia to leave, all dolled up in her evening gown, and then went to his mother's room. She was asleep, but she woke as soon as he entered. Her eyes held that same resignation, that same sadness. "Mom." He sat on the edge of the bed. "I need you to listen to me. I know everything. I know how she treats you. I know about her plans. I know what she wants to do." Helena closed her eyes, as if wanting to disappear. "Son, please." "No, Mom, not this time. I've spent my whole life trying to honor you, trying to be worthy of your sacrifices, and I failed. I failed because I brought you into a house that should have been a refuge and became a prison." She opened her eyes, and Robert saw tears streaming down her temples, wetting the pillow. "I can do something," he continued. "I can expose everything. I can protect you. But only if you let me, only if you give me permission to fight." Helena was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was so low, Robert had to lean in to hear. "You know what happens if you fight? You lose everything, house, money, respect. I not want that for you. And do you know what happens if I don't fight, Mom? I lose you, and I can't bear that." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Robert saw something change in her eyes. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a spark of hope, tiny and fragile, but there. "Think, son. Let me think." Robert nodded, kissed her forehead, and left. He knew he couldn't force her. He knew that after a lifetime of being silenced, forced to be small, forced to disappear, the decision had to be hers. But he also knew that time was running out, and that, whether she wanted to or not, he would soon have to make a decision that would change everything. Outside, the city of New York continued its frantic pace, indifferent to the drama unfolding inside that mansion on the Upper East Side. Millions of lives, millions of stories, all crossing and diverging in the illuminated streets of a metropolis that never stops. And there, in that house that should have been a home, a woman was trying to decide if she still had the strength to exist out loud after a lifetime of whispering. A week had passed since Robert returned from his trip, and each day felt longer than the last. He watched, took notes, gathered evidence. During the day he feigned normalcy, went to the office, attended meetings, signed contracts. But his mind was always at home, wondering what was happening to his mother at that very moment. Maria kept her promise. Every day messages arrived on Robert's phone, small cruelties that accumulated like drops of poison. Patricia had hidden Helena's Korean cookware. Patricia had yelled at her for using the guest bathroom. Patricia had threatened to throw all her origami in the trash if she kept leaving those papers around the house. Each message was a punch to Robert's gut. But he knew he had to be strategic. He couldn't just explode. Patricia was a lawyer. She knew how to use the law to her advantage. If he acted on impulse, she would turn the tables on him. He needed a solid plan, irrefutable evidence. On Thursday of that week, Robert faked another business trip. He told Patricia he needed to go to Chicago to solve some problems on a construction site. She barely looked up from her phone when he said goodbye, but Robert didn't go to the airport. He went to a discreet hotel in Greenwich Village, where he checked in under a false name and began monitoring the house's security cameras in real time. What he saw in the following hours filled him with a rage so deep he had to leave the room and walk the streets to keep from doing something crazy. With him out of the house, Patricia felt free to show her true colors. Robert watched her yell at Helena for nearly 20 minutes because the elderly woman had tried to water the plants in the living room. He watched her throw the lunch his mother had prepared in the trash, saying it stank. He watched her lock the doors to the library, the office, the TV room, making his mother a prisoner in her own room and the kitchen. But the worst was yet to come. On Friday morning, Robert saw a man in a suit enter the house through the cameras. Patricia welcomed him into the living room with coffee and smiles. The audio wasn't clear, but Robert could read their lips at times. Lawyer, conservatorship, mental incapacity. He recorded everything, every second of the meeting that lasted over an hour. When the man left, Patricia went up to Helena's room. Robert turned up the volume, his heart pounding erratically. His mother was sitting by the window, as always, folding origami. "Helena, we need to talk." Patricia's voice was falsely sweet. "I've been thinking a lot about you, you know, and I don't think you're well." Helena looked up, confused. "I am well. Yes, thank you." "No, you're not." Patricia sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap like a teacher talking to a child. "You've been forgetful, confused. The other day you left the stove on. You could have started a fire." "I not do that. I always turn off stove." "You think you didn't, but you did, and that's worrying, Helena, very worrying. I've spoken with some doctors and they think you should have some tests to see how your head is." "My head is fine." "That's precisely the problem." Patricia sighed, as if she were the most understanding person in the world. "People with mental problems don't know they have them. That's why they need help. And I want to help you. I want to take you to a place where you can be cared for by professionals." Helena began to tremble. Her hands clutched the origami she was holding, crushing the paper. "I not want to go. Away. Please." "It's not a matter of wanting to, Helena. It's a matter of necessity. And Robert will understand. He'll see it's for your own good." "Robert not accept this. My son not let you." Patricia laughed, a humorless sound. "Your son trusts me, Helena, more than he trusts you. After all, I'm his wife. You're just someone he feels obligated to care for out of pity." Helena lowered her head, and Robert saw the tears begin to fall onto her face. Each of Patricia's words was a blade cutting slowly, making the wound hurt more. "So, here's what's going to happen. Next week you're going to have an evaluation. It will be quick, painless, and then we'll find a suitable place for you. A place where you won't bother anyone, where you won't be an embarrassment." "I not embarrassment, I just want to be near son." "But your son doesn't want you near, Helena." Patricia stood up, smoothing her skirt. "He just doesn't have the courage to say it to your face. So, I'll do it for him. I'll solve this problem that you represent. She left the room, slamming the door. Robert watched his mother collapse into silent sobs, her body bent over, her hands clutching the origami to her chest as if it were all she had left. Robert shut down the computer before the temptation to go home and strangle Patricia became irresistible. He needed to keep a cool head. He needed to think. But thinking was becoming impossible when every fiber of his being screamed for immediate action. He called his lawyer. Martin answered on the second ring. "I have everything," Robert said without preamble. "Recordings, audio files, witnesses. I have proof she's planning to have my mother committed against her will, with false documents." "Good," Martin paused. "But Robert, I need to ask you something. Is your mother on board with this, with exposing everything publicly?" Robert hesitated. "Not yet. She's afraid of making me lose everything." "And are you willing to lose everything?" "If I have to, yes." "Then let's schedule a meeting. You, me, your mother, and 2 other lawyers specializing in family law and cases of psychological abuse. We need her to understand that she has legal backing, that she's not alone in this. Can we do it tomorrow?" "Yes, my office, 3 in the afternoon." Robert agreed and hung up. He spent the rest of the day at the hotel, reviewing the recordings, preparing a complete dossier. There was so much material he lost count. Months and months of systematic abuse, all recorded on video and audio. How had he not seen it before? How had he been so blind? On Friday night he returned home. Patricia was in the living room watching a French film with subtitles. She greeted him with a quick kiss, asked about Chicago, and returned her attention to the TV. Robert went straight up to his mother's room. Helena was awake, even though it was nearly midnight. She received him with a sad smile, that same resigned smile Robert was beginning to hate, not because of her, but because of everything that smile represented. "Mom, tomorrow afternoon we're going out. Me, you, and some people who need to talk to us." "About what, son?" "About what we're going to do, about how we're going to protect you." Helena shook her head slowly. "Robert, I already say, I not want trouble. But the trouble already exists, Mom. And it's going to get worse. She wants to have you committed. She wants to say you're crazy, that you can't take care of yourself, and she's going to use paid doctors to do it." Helena's eyes widened. "Committed? Like place for crazy people?" "Exactly." She was silent for a long moment, processing. When she spoke, her voice was a broken whisper. "She really hate me that much?" Robert sat beside her, taking her hands. "It's not about you, Mom. It's about her, about the kind of person she is, and that I couldn't see before." Helena squeezed his hands. "If I let you fight, you lose everything. Money, house, respect, everything you build. And if I don't fight, I lose you." Robert looked her in the eye. "And I can't accept that. So please, Mom, come with me tomorrow. Listen to what the lawyers have to say, and then you decide. But at least listen." She hesitated, but finally nodded. "Okay, I listen." On Saturday afternoon, Robert told Patricia he was taking his mother for some medical tests. Patricia seemed pleased with this, as if he were finally seeing reason. They left together, Helena silent in the back seat of the car, her hands clasped in her lap. Martin's office was in an elegant building on Park Avenue. When they entered the conference room, 3 people were waiting. Martin, a man with graying hair and a firm gaze, Dr. Cameron, a family law specialist, a woman in her 50s, with a kind but determined expression, and Dr. Paul, a lawyer specializing in cases of psychological abuse and elder law. "Helena, it's a pleasure to meet you." Martin shook her hand gently. "Please, have a seat. We want you to be comfortable." They sat around the table, Robert beside his mother, the lawyers on the other side. For the next hour they explained everything in detail. They explained that what Patricia was doing was a crime. They explained that there were laws to protect the elderly from psychological abuse. They explained that Helena had rights, that her voice mattered, that her story mattered. Helena listened to them in silence, tears slowly streaming down her face. When they finished, She stared at her own hands for a long time. Finally, she raised her face. "All my life," she began, her voice trembling, "I learned to be small, learn not to take up space, learn that my voice not important, that my accent is reason for shame, that my face is reason for jokes. When I arrive in America 50 years ago, people laugh at me, laugh how I talk, how I dress, how I eat. I learn to swallow it, learn to smile and bow my head." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I work very hard, very hard. 3 jobs, sometimes 4, but I always invisible, always foreigner, always wrong. Even when I do everything right, always something wrong, wrong accent, wrong face, wrong food." Robert squeezed her hand but didn't interrupt. "When Robert born," she continued, "I think he will be different. He born here. He speak perfect English. He have no accent. He not foreigner. He can be someone. And he is." She looked at her son, her eyes shining. "He is everything I dream. He have respect. He have success. He have life I never could have. That why I not want to make trouble. That why I want to be quiet. Because if I make trouble, he lose everything. And then all the years I suffer, all the days I work until my hands bleed, everything be for nothing." "Helena," Dr. Cameron leaned across the table, her voice gentle. "You are not a problem. You are a victim. And your son will not lose anything by protecting you. On the contrary, he will gain something much more important, the dignity of defending someone he loves. But people not understand." Helena looked at each of them. "People see me as annoying old foreigner, see me as burden, as thing that should be hidden." Dr. Paul spoke up. "Helena, you're right about one thing. Many people won't understand. Many people will judge, but many others will. They will see you as a symbol of resistance, as someone who survived decades of prejudice and still raised an extraordinary son. Your story matters." Helena was silent again. Robert saw the struggle happening inside her, decades of conditioning fighting against a spark of hope that insisted on existing. Finally she spoke so quietly that everyone had to lean in to hear. "If I do this, if I let tell my story, what happen?" Martin answered. "We will expose everything Patricia has done, the recordings, the audio files, the threats. We will block the conservatorship proceedings. We will ensure that you are safe. And Robert, he lose house. There will probably be a divorce. And yes, he might lose some of his assets, but not everything. And the truth will be on his side." Helena looked at her son. "You sure about this, Robert? Sure you want to do this?" Robert held his mother's face between his hands, just as she used to do with him when he was a child. "Mom, my whole life you've been my fortress. You were the one who taught me what it means to have dignity even when the world tries to take it from you. Let me be your fortress now. Let me show you that your voice matters, that you matter." Helena's tears now flowed freely. She nodded, slowly at first, then more firmly. "Okay, okay. I let you. I tell my story. Not for me, but for all mothers who suffer like me, for all foreign people who are treated like trash." The lawyers smiled. "Then let's begin." They spent the rest of the afternoon planning their strategy. First, they would need an independent medical evaluation proving that Helena was perfectly lucid. They scheduled it for early Monday morning. Then they would start gathering witnesses. Maria would be crucial, but they would also look for other people who might have witnessed Patricia's behavior. Martin suggested something more. "I think we should do this publicly. Call the press. Hold a conference. Helena's story is powerful, and if people know what's happening, it will be much harder for Patricia to manipulate the situation." Robert hesitated. "Won't that expose my mother to more pain?" "It will," Dr. Cameron admitted, "but it will also give her a voice. And sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to expose it to the light." Helena surprised them all by speaking firmly. "I accept this. I spend whole life hidden. Maybe it's time to be seen." When they left the office, it was already night. New York City glittered under the lights of the buildings, the heavy traffic on Park Avenue pulsing like the city's heart. Robert and Helena walked to the car in silence, each processing the weight of the decision that had just been made. Before getting into the car, Helena stopped and looked at her son. "Robert, you know what this mean, right? Life never be same again." "I know, Mom. But life as it was wasn't life, it was a lie." She nodded and got in the car. On the way back, Helena looked out the window, watching the city go by. "This city received me 50 years ago," she said softly. "I arrive with fear, with shame, with nothing but big belly and diploma that worth nothing. But I stay, I fight, I survive. And now maybe I can finally say, I am from here too. I also deserve to be here." Robert felt tears burning his eyes but kept driving. When they arrived home, Patricia was in the living room, typing furiously on her phone. She looked up as they entered. "How were the tests?" "They were fine," Robert lied. "We'll have the results next week." "Good." Patricia returned her attention to her phone. Robert walked his mother to her room. Before leaving, he turned. "Mom, starting Monday, everything changes. Are you ready?" Helena looked at the origami scattered on her desk. 50 years folding paper, Robert. 50 years folding myself to fit in small spaces. I think it time to unfold." He smiled, for the first time in weeks, feeling something like hope. "Good night, Mom." "Good night, son." Robert went downstairs and found Patricia still in the living room. She looked at him with an expression he could no longer decipher. She had been lying for so long that he wondered if she still knew how to be genuine. "I need to talk to you about something," he said, sitting on the sofa. Patricia put down her phone, seemingly interested. "Of course, what is it?" "I've been thinking. I think we should take a trip, just the two of us, to reconnect, you know." She seemed surprised but pleased. "I'd love that." "When?" "How about next month? We need to finish a few things at work first, but then we can go. Paris, maybe?" "Paris would be perfect." Robert forced a smile. Then it settled. He knew he was buying time. He knew that in less than a week, any pretense of normality would be shattered. But he needed Patricia to feel secure, to suspect nothing. The element of surprise would be crucial. That night, lying in bed next to a woman who now repulsed him, Robert thought about everything that was about to happen. He thought about his mother, in that small room at the end of the hall, probably awake, folding origami, trying to find the courage for what was to come. He thought of all the immigrant mothers, of all the foreign people who were treated as less, as intruders in lands they helped build. He thought of how many stories were buried in silence, how many voices were suffocated before they could even scream. And he thought that even if it cost him everything, even if he lost the house, the money, the prestige, it would be worth it. Because some battles aren't about winning. They're about having the courage to fight. They are about saying loud and clear that human dignity is not negotiable, that love is not conditional, that a real family is not built on lies and appearances, but on truth and acceptance. In the room next door, Patricia was already fast asleep, unaware of the storm that was about to break over her carefully constructed life of lies and manipulation. And in the room at the end of the hall, Helena folded another piece of origami. But this time, it wasn't a small, delicate bird, made not to bother anyone. It was a dragon, large, defiant, impossible to ignore. She placed it on the desk next to the others and smiled, a single tear rolling down her face. Maybe after 50 years it was time to take up space, to have a voice, to exist in vivid colors instead of shades of gray. Maybe it was time to show that even paper, when folded with purpose, can become something powerful. Monday would come soon, and with it, the beginning of a new story. A story that would not be silenced, a story that would refuse to disappear, a story of resistance, of love, and of a woman who finally found the strength to say, I deserve to exist too. Monday dawned, gray over New York City. Low clouds covered the city, threatening rain at any moment. Robert woke up early before the alarm, his heart already racing with the adrenaline of what was to come. Beside him, Patricia slept peacefully, with no idea that this would be the last day she would sleep in peace. At 7 in the morning, Robert and Helena left for the hospital. Patricia was still in the shower when they departed. Robert left a note saying the tests would start early and they would be back in the afternoon. It was the truth, just not the whole truth. Dr. Henry Travers received them at New York Presbyterian Hospital. He was a respected neurologist with a 40-year career and an impeccable reputation. Martin knew him personally and had guaranteed that the report would be absolutely unbiased and professional. Helena underwent a battery of tests for 3 hours, cognitive tests, interviews, memory and reasoning assessments. At the end, Dr. Travers sat with them in his office, the report already printed in his hands. "Helena," he began, smiling gently, "you are perfectly lucid. Your cognitive ability is excellent for someone your age. Memory intact, logical reasoning preserved, perfect temporal and spatial. Orientation. There is absolutely nothing to justify a conservatorship." Helena sighed, relieved. Robert saw tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you, Doctor." "In fact," Dr. Travers continued, handing a copy of the report to Robert, "I included an observation in the document. I noted signs of prolonged emotional stress. You mentioned during our conversation that you have been feeling devalued and isolated. This is not a medical condition, but a life situation that needs to be addressed. I put that in the report because I believe it's relevant." Robert clutched the document in his hands. "Thank you so much, Doctor. This will make all the difference." They left the hospital and went straight to Martin's office. Maria was already there, nervous but determined. She had brought a folder with detailed notes of everything she had witnessed in recent months. There were also 2 neighbors who had agreed to give testimony about strange behaviors they had noticed. Dr. Cameron coordinated everything with impressive efficiency. "We have enough material," she announced after reviewing all the documents. "The video recordings, the audio files, the medical report, the testimonies. This is more than enough to block any attempt at conservatorship and to sue for psychological abuse." "And the press conference?" Robert asked. "Scheduled for tomorrow, Tuesday at 10 in the morning. We've already contacted the main media outlets. The story is strong, Robert. It will get coverage." Helena, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "And what I need to say?" Dr. Cameron sat beside her. "You are going to tell your story, Helena. Who you are, how you came to the United States, how you raised your son. And then you'll talk about what you've been suffering. You don't need to be ashamed. You don't need to be afraid. Your story is one of courage." Helena nodded, but Robert saw her hands were trembling. He held them, squeezing tightly. "I'll be by your side, Mum, the whole time." In the afternoon, when they returned home, Patricia was in the living room with an expression Robert couldn't decipher. She stared at them as they entered, her eyes scanning them both as if searching for something. "How were the tests?" Robert handed her a copy of the report. "They were great. My mother is perfectly healthy." Patricia took the document and read it quickly. Her expression hardened. "This doesn't make sense. She's clearly confused, forgetful." "No, Patricia." Robert cut her off, his voice firm. "She's not. And you know it." Patricia stared at him, and for the first time, Robert saw a flicker of something like fear in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I know everything. I know how you treat my mother when I'm not here. I know about your plans to have her committed. I know about the conversations with lawyers. I know everything, Patricia." The silence that followed was dense, heavy. Patricia looked at Helena, then back at Robert. Her face went through several expressions in a few seconds: surprise, anger, fear, and finally, something that looked like cold calculation. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice controlled. "You're clearly stressed, confused. Let me explain." "No." Robert took a step forward. "The time for explanations is over. The time for lies is over. Tomorrow morning, we're holding a press conference. We're going to show everything. The recordings, the audio files, the testimonies. Everything." Patricia turned pale. "You can't do that. It will destroy you. It will destroy your reputation, your company, everything." "Then let it be destroyed." "I don't care anymore." "Have you lost your mind?" Patricia screamed now, her composure finally breaking. "You're willing to throw everything away for her? For an old woman who can't even speak English properly?" Robert felt fury rise like fire in his veins, but he kept his voice calm. "That old woman is my mother, and she's worth more than anything you and I ever built together." Patricia laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "You're going to regret this, Robert. You're going to regret it deeply. When you lose everything, when your company goes under, when your friends turn their backs on you, you'll remember this moment and you'll regret it. Maybe." Robert shrugged. "But I'll be able to sleep at night, will you?" Patricia didn't answer. She grabbed her purse, her car keys, and stormed out, slamming the door. Robert heard her car speed away and disappear down the street. He turned to his mother, who was standing in the same spot, tears streaming silently down her face. "Mom." She went to him and hugged him. Robert, always so strong, so in control, felt himself break down in her arms. He cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child, all the pent-up emotions of the past few days finally finding release. "It's okay, son." Helena stroked his hair, her voice soft. "It's okay. We're going to be okay." That night, Robert didn't sleep. He stayed in his office, reviewing every document, every recording, every word he would say at the conference. He wanted to be sure nothing was left out, that the full truth would be told. At 3 in the morning, he received a message from Martin. "Patricia just filed for an injunction to stop the press conference. Claims prior defamation. We've already filed a counter-argument. Should be ruled." "On early in the morning," Robert replied. "We'll be ready for any decision." At 5 in the morning, another message. "Injunction denied. Judge deemed the information to be in the public interest. Press conference is on." Robert felt a mix of relief and tension. It was really happening. There was no going back. At 8 in the morning, he woke Helena. She was already awake, sitting up in bed, surrounded by origami. This time, there were dozens of them. Birds, flowers, animals, all in vibrant colors. It was as if she were preparing to fly. "Ready, Mom?" She looked at him, and there was something different in her eyes. It was no longer fear, it was determination. "Ready." They arrived at the hotel, where the press conference was to be held at 9:30. The room was packed, TV cameras, journalists from major outlets, photographers. Robert recognized reporters from CNN, NBC, ABC, from newspapers like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Martin hadn't been kidding when he said the story had potential. Dr. Cameron met them at the door. "Everything's ready. You go in, I'll make a brief introduction explaining the legal context, and then you speak." Robert: "First, to contextualize the situation and present the evidence. Then Helena to tell her personal story." "What if I freeze?" Helena asked, her voice small. "You won't freeze," Dr. Cameron smiled. "You've spent 50 years finding the strength for impossible things. This will be no different." At 10 o'clock sharp, the doors opened. Robert and Helena entered the room, followed by the lawyers. The sound of clicking cameras was deafening. Flashes of light came from all sides. Robert held his mother's hand tightly, guiding her to the table set up at the front of the room. Dr. Cameron spoke first, explaining in legal terms what was happening. She spoke of the attempted wrongful conservatorship, of psychological abuse of the elderly, of the laws that protected people like Helena. Her voice was firm, professional, leaving no room for doubt. Then it was Robert's turn. He stood up, looked at the cameras, and began to speak. "My name is Robert Miller. I'm a businessman, the founder of Miller Construction, but today I'm not here as a businessman. I'm here as a son. As the son of an extraordinary woman who has spent the last few months being systematically humiliated and abused inside. The very home I built to honor her." He told them everything. Helena's story, how she came to the United States, how she worked 3 jobs to raise him. He told them about bringing her to live in the mansion, thinking he could finally repay everything she had done. And he told them what he had discovered, the humiliations, the insults, the plans for forced institutionalization. And then, with a projector, he showed the recordings. The journalists watched in silence the video of Patricia yelling at Helena, throwing food away, locking doors. They heard the audio of the conversations where she planned the conservatorship. They saw the documents, the reports she had tried to manipulate. When he finished, the room was in absolute silence. Robert saw tears on the faces of some female journalists. He saw expressions of shock and outrage. "And now," he concluded, his voice choked with emotion, "I want my mother to tell her story, in her own words, because she deserves to be heard. Her voice deserves to be heard after being silenced for so long." Helena stood up. Her legs were trembling, and Robert stood beside her, ready to support her if needed. But she took a deep breath and began to speak. She began in English, her heavy accent making some words difficult. But there was a strength in that voice, a resilience that could not be denied. "My name Helena Park. I come to America 50 years ago. I pregnant, alone, no money. I have literature degree in Korea, but here it worth nothing, so I work very hard." She told them about the garment factories, about the offices she cleaned at night, about how she studied English in old notebooks. She told them about raising Robert alone, about every sacrifice, every hardship, and then she told them about the last few months. "I come live with son because he ask. He say he want to care for me, and I happy, very happy. But his wife not want me there. She say I am shame, say my food smell bad, say my accent is ugly, say I not deserve to be in that house." The tears were flowing freely now, but her voice did not waver. "I spend whole life being treated as less, as foreigner, as intruder. Even after 50 years here, still seen as not belong. And I swallow this. Swallow because I want son to have good life, not want him to carry shame of having foreign mother. But now I see that shame not in being foreigner. Shame is in treating person as less just because she different. Shame is in making person feel they not deserve to exist." She looked directly at the cameras. "I not just speak for me, I speak for all mothers who come from outside, for all people who are treated as less because accent different, because face different, because food different. We are people too. We also deserve respect. We also deserve to belong." The room erupted in applause. Journalists stood up clapping, some were crying openly. Robert hugged his mother, and the two of them stood there, in the middle of that whirlwind of cameras and flashes, holding each other, crying, finally allowing the pain to surface. Then came the questions, dozens of them, about Patricia, about Robert's plans, about the future. Robert answered them all honestly. Yes, there would be a divorce. Yes, he might lose part of his assets. No, he did not regret it. He would do it all again. When the press conference ended, it was past 2 in the afternoon. Robert and Helena left through the back door of the hotel, exhausted but relieved. Maria was waiting for them in the car, smiling. "You were incredible," she said, wiping her own tears. "Incredible." On the way home, Robert checked his phone. There were already dozens of messages. From friends, business partners, people he didn't even know had his number. Some of support, others of criticism. Some clients saying they would break their contracts, others saying they would support his decision. And then he saw the news. The story was already on every major news site. Businessman accuses wife of abusing elderly mother. Korean immigrant tells story of resilience after decades of prejudice. Videos of humiliation shock New York City. Robert's phone wouldn't stop ringing. He turned it off, put it on silent. He would deal with the consequences later. For now he just wanted to get home, to the house that would soon no longer be his, but for the moment still sheltered his mother. When they arrived, there was a strange commotion on the street. News vans were parked in front of the gate, journalists trying to get more statements. Robert drove around, entered through the garage and locked everything. Inside the house it was silent. Patricia was gone. Her clothes had disappeared from the closet. Some personal items were also missing. She had left an envelope on the bed, addressed to Robert. He opened it with trembling hands. It was a formal divorce notice and a handwritten letter. In the letter, Patricia said he had made the biggest mistake of his life, that he would regret it, that she would make sure he lost everything, that she would make an example of him. Robert crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. He had no energy for anger, only exhaustion. He went down to the kitchen where Helena was making tea. She saw him and smiled, a smile that had something new to it, something free. "How are you?" he asked. "Tired." She poured tea into 2 cups. "But good. For first time in long time, I am good." They sat at the table, drinking tea in silence. Outside, the city continued its frantic pace, indifferent, and yet completely connected to the drama that had just unfolded. Robert's phone rang again. This time he answered. It was a reporter from the New York Times asking for a more in-depth interview. Robert accepted. And then he accepted another, and another. If he was going to do this, he was going to do it right. His mother's story would be told in full. That evening, when they watched the national news, the report on the press conference was one of the top stories. They showed clips from the recordings, Helena's emotional speech, commentary from experts on human rights and elder law. The anchor called the case emblematic of the silent violence against immigrants and the elderly. On social media, Helena's name was a trending topic. There was everything. Massive support, with people sharing their own stories of mistreated immigrant relatives. But there was also criticism, people saying it was a private matter, that he was exposing his family for publicity. Robert read a few comments and then closed the app. He couldn't let it affect him. He had done what he needed to do. The rest was out of his control. That night, for the first time in months, Helena slept soundly. Robert checked on her in her room before going to his own, and she was serene, the origami arranged on her desk like a colorful army of hope. In the master bedroom, now empty without Patricia's presence, Robert lay down and stared at the ceiling. His life had changed completely in less than 24 hours, and he knew there was still much more to come. Patricia would not give up easily. There would be lawsuits, court battles, attempts to destroy his reputation, but for the first time in a long time, Robert felt he was on the right path. It wasn't the easy path. It wasn't the path society expected of him, but it was the path that allowed him to look in the mirror and recognize the person he saw. It was the path that honored the woman who had sacrificed everything so he could be someone. It was the path that said, loud and clear, that human dignity had no price. That family wasn't about blood or appearances, but about love and respect. That sometimes the greatest courage isn't in building empires, but in having the strength to protect those we love when the whole world seems to be against us. And as New York slept, restless as ever, inside that mansion on the Upper East Side, 2 people rested with a clear conscience, one who had finally allowed her voice to be heard, another who had finally fulfilled the silent promise he had made to himself since childhood, that he would never leave his mother alone again. The days following the press conference were a whirlwind. Helena's story spread like wildfire, not just in New York, but across the entire country. Television shows invited her for interviews. Magazines wanted to do features. Social media influencers shared her story, each adding their own experiences of xenophobia and prejudice. Robert dealt with the consequences in the business world. As predicted, some clients broke their contracts. Conservative investors distanced themselves, claiming they didn't want to be associated with scandals. But to his surprise, new partners emerged, business owners who admired his courage, clients who valued his integrity. In 1 week, his company had lost about 20% of its contracts, but gained another 15% from completely new sources. Patricia, meanwhile, did not remain silent. She hired the best lawyers in New York and launched an unprecedented legal war. She accused Robert of invasion of privacy for using the security recordings. She claimed defamation. She demanded half of everything he owned, including the company. She filed a countersuit claiming that she was the one who had suffered emotional abuse during the marriage. The hearings were grueling. Patricia appeared impeccable, all composure and elegance, with a well-rehearsed narrative of how she had tried to help Helena, but was misunderstood. Her lawyers painted Robert as an ungrateful son who had chosen to publicly humiliate his wife to gain public sympathy. But the evidence spoke louder. The videos didn't lie. The audio files were clear. And Helena's medical report destroyed any attempt to claim she needed guardianship. During this difficult period, something unexpected began to happen. Helena, who had spent her entire life invisible, suddenly found herself being seen, and not just seen, but admired. It started when a teacher from a community center in Flushing, Queens, recognized her on the street. The woman, named Mariana, approached Helena with tears in her eyes and thanked her for having the courage to tell her story. "My grandmother was also an immigrant," she said. "She also suffered a lot, but she never had a voice. You spoke for her." Mariana invited Helena to visit the community center. It was a small but vibrant space where children and seniors from the neighborhood gathered for activities. Helena accepted, somewhat hesitantly. She wasn't sure what to do there. But when she entered and saw the colorful walls, the children's drawings, the smell of fresh coffee, something inside her lit up. She remembered when Robert was little and she would take him to the public library on weekends, the only free place where they could spend time together outside their cramped apartment. "What do you know how to do?" Mariana asked as they had coffee. Helena thought, "I know how to sew, I know how to make origami, I know how to tell stories." Mariana smiled. "Then come and teach us." And so it began. Helena started going to the community center 3 times a week. She began timidly, teaching origami to a small group of children. The children adored this kind lady with the funny accent who turned paper into birds and flowers. They asked for stories and she told them. Stories from Korea, stories of how she came to the United States, stories of overcoming and hope. Gradually, more people began to show up. Not just children, but adults too. Other immigrants who identified with her journey. Second generation. Youth who wanted to better understand their roots. Americans curious about different cultures. One day, an independent journalist named Philip appeared at the center. He was making a documentary about the cultural resistance of immigrants in New York and had heard about Helena. He asked for permission to film one of her classes. Helena hesitated, but the children encouraged her. "Come on, Mrs. Helena. We want everyone to know you." Philip filmed for an entire afternoon. He captured Helena teaching the children to fold suru, the paper cranes that symbolize peace and hope. He captured her telling the story of how at 23 she had disembarked at the port of New York with a small suitcase and a huge dream. He captured the shining eyes of the children as they listened, fascinated. When the video was posted on the documentary project's social media, it went viral in a matter of hours. Millions of views, countless shares, emotional comments from people all over the country saying that Helena's story had touched them deeply. A university professor of cultural studies from NYU got in touch. She wanted to interview Helena for a project on immigrant resistance narratives. An immigration museum invited her to give a lecture. A publishing house expressed interest in publishing her biography. Helena was stunned by it all. "I'm not important," she would tell Robert every night. "Why people want to hear me?" "Because your story matters, Mom. Because you represent millions of people who have been silenced, and now you have a chance to give a voice to all of them." The mansion on the Upper East Side also began to change. With Patricia gone, the previously locked rooms were opened. The library started hosting study groups from the community center. The large living room became a space for craft workshops. The kitchen finally was filled with the aromas Helena had always wanted to prepare. Robert watched these transformations with a warm heart. The house was finally fulfilling its purpose. It was no longer a showroom of success and status. It was a living, pulsating home, full of voices and laughter. Maria, now with an expanded role, helped coordinate the activities. She brought her own children to the workshops, and they fell in love with Helena. They called her Grandma, and she responded with an affection she had kept dammed up for decades. Meanwhile, the legal battle with Patricia continued. She played dirty, trying every possible angle. She hired private investigators to follow Robert, hoping to find something compromising. She leaked distorted information to gossip columnists, trying to tarnish his reputation. She pressured suppliers and business partners to break with his company. Robert was prepared. Martin and his team countered every move with surgical precision. And with each new low from Patricia, public opinion turned more against her. On social media, she was seen as a villain. Memes emerged comparing her to cruel soap opera characters. 6 months after the press conference, the judge finally delivered the divorce settlement. Robert lost the mansion. He was forced to sell it and split the value equally. He also lost a significant portion of his investments. But he managed to keep the company and his freedom, and more importantly, the judge banned Patricia from any contact or future attempt to have Helena placed under conservatorship, under penalty of criminal prosecution. When Robert received the news, he was at the community center watching his mother teach calligraphy to a group of teenagers. He smiled. He had lost a house, but he had gained something infinitely more valuable. He had gained the certainty of having done the right thing. He had gained the peace of mind of seeing his mother finally blossom. The sale of the mansion happened quickly. A Chinese businessman bought it, saying he admired the story of resistance that the space represented. As they organized the move, Helena walked through the empty rooms, touching the walls gently, as if saying goodbye. "Not sad," she told Robert. "House just a place. Family is people." They moved into a spacious apartment in Brooklyn Heights, in a renovated old building that retained its charm and character. It had 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a balcony with a view of the treetops. It was different from the mansion, but somehow it felt cozier, more real. Helena chose the smallest room, the one that got the most morning sun. She turned it into her sanctuary, filled with origami, old photos, and books in Korean that Robert had bought for her. It was small, but it was hers, truly hers. It was during the move that Robert met Marina. She lived in the apartment upstairs and came down to offer help when she saw the commotion. She was a history teacher, 36 years old, with curly hair tied in a messy bun and a smile that lit up her entire face. "Do you guys need a hand?" she offered, already grabbing a box before waiting for an answer. Robert was surprised by her spontaneity. Thanks. But there are a lot of boxes. Even better, I have the afternoon free, and I'm strong despite appearances." She helped for hours, carrying boxes, organizing things, making jokes that had Helena laughing. There was something light about her, something genuine that Robert hadn't seen in anyone for a long time. When they finally finished, it was already night. Marina refused money for her help, but accepted the invitation for dinner. Helena prepared bibimbap, a Korean dish of rice with vegetables and meat. Marina ate with enthusiasm, asking questions about the cuisine, the culture, Helena's history. And then she said something that caught Robert off guard. "I saw your press conference. I saw when you told your story. It was one of the bravest things I've ever seen." Robert didn't know what to say. Marina continued. "I'm the daughter of a single mother. My mom raised me alone, working as a maid. She suffered a lot of prejudice for being black, poor, without a formal education. When I saw Mrs. Helena speaking, I remembered her. The strength these women have, the resilience." She looked at Helena with genuine admiration. "You're an inspiration." Helena, visibly moved, stood up and hugged Marina. Thank you for seeing me." That was the first of many nights. Marina started visiting the apartment, bringing books, movies, stories. She and Helena developed a special friendship. Marina taught Helena more formal English, helping her lose her fear of words. Helena, in turn, taught Marina how to make origami, cook Korean dishes, and see beauty in patience. And between Robert and Marina, something began to blossom. Slow, careful, unhurried. Conversations that lasted until dawn. Walks through the neighborhood on Sundays. Laughter shared over silly things. It wasn't like with Patricia, that intense, performative love that seemed more concerned with appearances than substance. With Marina, it was different. It was quiet, solid, real. It was waking up and knowing there was someone who truly saw him, not the polished version he presented to the world. Marina knew the whole story. She knew the scars, the mistakes, the difficult choices, and still, she stayed. Not despite those things, but including them. Because she loved the whole person, not just the convenient version. A year after the press conference, Philip's documentary about Helena was released at a film festival in New York. The 20-minute short film called Folds of Paper won the award for Best Documentary. Helena was invited to come on stage to receive the trophy alongside Philip. Standing before an audience of hundreds, microphone trembling in her hand, Helena took a deep breath and spoke. First in Korean, then in English. "I spent 73 years in this life, 50 of those years here, in America. For a long time I was invisible, was foreigner, was less. But my son teach me something important. He teach that dignity not something others give to you. It is something you carry inside. And when you remember this, when you decide to exist out loud, world has no choice but to listen. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Helena came down from the stage straight into the arms of Robert, who was waiting in the front row next to Marina. The three of them hugged, crying and laughing at the same time. In the following months, invitations kept coming. Helena gave talks at schools, participated in panels on immigration, and was the subject of international reports. Her face, hidden for so long, was now in magazines, newspapers, on TV screens. But what filled her with the most joy was her work at the community center. There, away from the spotlight, she found purpose. Children she had helped teach origami came back years later to thank her. Entire families started attending the workshops. The center grew, got more space, more resources. A foundation dedicated to preserving the cultural memories of immigrants invited Helena to be an ambassador. The work involved traveling across the country, listening to and recording the stories of other people who, like her, had come from afar and built new lives in a strange land. Helena accepted. At 74, she finally had a voice, and she would use that voice to amplify others that still whispered in the silence. During one of these trips to Los Angeles, where a large Korean community lived, Helena met other women with stories similar to hers, women who had worked in garment factories, who had raised children alone, who had swallowed humiliations to give their children a better future. In a discussion circle, one of these women, Mrs. Kim, 80 years old, held Helena's hands and said in Korean, "You did for us what we could not do for ourselves. You said that we exist, that we matter. Thank you." Helena cried, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of fulfillment, of knowing that her suffering had not been in vain, that her story would serve so that others would not have to carry the same silence. 2 years after the press conference, Robert asked Marina to marry him. It was nothing elaborate, it was the three of them, Robert, Marina and Helena, having a picnic in Central Park. It was a sunny Saturday, and the park was full of families, runners, children playing. They spread a blanket under a tree, opened the basket of food Helena had prepared. As they ate, Robert pulled a small box from his pocket and knelt on the grass. "Marina," he began, his eyes already moist, "you came into my life when I most needed to relearn what true love means. You showed me that family isn't about perfection or appearances. It's about being present, about seeing and being seen. You love my mother as if she were your own. You love me with my scars and all, and I want to spend the rest of my life loving you back. Will you marry me?" Marina didn't even have to think. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Helena applauded, laughing and crying at the same time. When Marina hugged her, she whispered in her ear, "Thank you for seeing my son for real." Marina whispered back, "Thank you for letting me be part of this family." The wedding was simple, at the same community center where Helena taught her classes. The children made the decorations, colorful origami hanging from transparent threads throughout the room. The food was a multicultural feast, with Korean, American, and even some African dishes that Marina insisted on including in honor of her own roots. There was no exclusive guest list. Whoever wanted to come came, and many did. Friends, neighbors, students, teachers, families from the neighborhood. The small space was packed, vibrant with life and joy. During the ceremony, officiated by a friend of Marina's who was a justice of the peace, Robert and Marina wrote their own vows. When it was Robert's turn to speak, he looked at Marina, then at his mother, and said, "Marina, I promise to see you every day, to truly see you, not the version you think you need to be, but who you really are. I promise to build a home with you where no one has to make themselves small to fit in, where everyone can exist at their full size, with a loud voice taking up the space they deserve." Marina dried her tears and replied, "Robert, I promise to be your partner in the difficult battles. I promise to never forget that family is a daily choice. I promise to love your mother as my own, to honor her story as our story, and I promise that our home will always be a place of truth, even when the truth hurts. When they kissed, the applause echoed off the walls covered in origami. Helena in the front row was crying openly, but they were tears of pure joy. Her son had found not just love, but the right love. The love that chooses dignity over appearance. The love that embraces instead of hides. At the party that followed, as music played and people danced, Helena found herself surrounded by children asking for stories. She sat them in a circle and began to tell them about a woman who had crossed oceans, who had folded herself like paper for decades, but who one day decided to unfold, who decided it was time to fly. The children listened, fascinated, their eyes shining in the soft afternoon light. And when Helena finished, a little girl, no more than 6 years old, raised her hand. "Grandma Helena, when I grow up, I want to be brave like you." Helena smiled, stroking the girl's hair. "You already brave, dear. You just need to remember it when world try to make you forget." Years passed. Robert's company continued to grow, now with a different focus. He began building community centers, social spaces in underserved neighborhoods, affordable housing projects that respected the dignity of the residents. It wasn't the kind of construction that made headlines in business magazines, but it was the kind that transformed lives. Marina and Robert had a son, a boy they named Leo. When Helena held him for the first time, she saw the future in him, a future where perhaps people wouldn't have to fight so hard just to exist, where difference was celebrated, not hidden. She sang to him in Korean the same songs she had sung to Robert decades ago, and she promised herself that she would tell him all the stories about oceans crossed, sacrifices made, dignities preserved, so that he would know where he came from, so that he would never forget the price of the freedom to be who you are. Helena continued her work until she was 82. She only stopped when her body finally asked for rest. But even then, from the porch of her room in a single-story house that Robert had built especially with her accessibility in mind, she received visitors, former students who came to thank her, families who brought their children to meet the woman whose story had inspired them. On a New York autumn afternoon, sitting on the porch with Robert by her side, Helena looked at the garden full of flowers and said, "You know, son, for a long time I think my life was just about survive. But I discover that surviving is also form of resist, and resisting is form of living." Robert squeezed her hand. "You taught me that, Mom. You taught me that. Dignity isn't a luxury. It's a right. And that sometimes protecting that right means losing things the world says are important. But in the end, what really matters is being able to look in the mirror and recognize who you see." Helena smiled. "And you see someone good when you look in mirror?" Robert thought. "I see someone who's still learning, but I see someone trying, someone who chose the right path even when it was the hardest." "Then everything is okay, son. Everything is okay." They sat there, mother and son, watching the sun set over New York City. The city that had welcomed them, challenged them, transformed them. The city where a foreign woman had become a symbol of resistance, where a man had learned that success is not measured in bank accounts, but in dignities preserved. And as the sky turned shades of orange and pink, origami hanging on the porch danced in the wind. Little paper birds, each representing a story, a struggle, a victory. Each a reminder that even the most fragile things, when built with care and purpose, can fly. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Robert and Helena has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of courage, resilience, and unconditional love, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what marked you the most. This story reminds us that human dignity has no price, and that sometimes the greatest courage lies in defending those we love when the whole world seems to be against us. Every day, we bring intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul, which make us reflect on what really matters in life. We'll see you in the next episode.